Have you ever looked at a pile of your old stuff and just wondered, could I turn all this into something I really want? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to follow the story of a boy named Toby and his old, kinda rickety bicycle and see how his mission for an upgrade accidentally teaches us some of the biggest rules about money. Okay, let's get into it.
So here's the big question. Toby's got one simple goal: sell off his old junk at a flea market and make enough cash for a new bike. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? But what Toby's about to discover is that turning clutter into cash is basically a crash course in Economics 101. All right, Section 1, Lessons from a Flea Market. So Toby gets his stuff together, sets up his little stall, and you know what? That flea market becomes his first real classroom. This is where all the ideas about money and sales get real, fast.
Okay, so the very first puzzle you have to solve is pricing. And it's a tough one. If you aim too high, people are just going to walk right on by. But if you go too low, you're pretty much giving your stuff away for free. Finding that perfect price, that sweet spot, is a delicate dance. It's the first real step to turning those old toys into actual money. And this is where the real action begins. Just look at what happens with this stuffed rabbit. Toby starts off bold, asking for 10 euros. The customer just laughs and offers 3. Way too low, but Toby knows it's worth more than that. So they talk, they go back and forth, and finally they land on 4 euros. See? Nobody won or lost. They found a middle ground where both people walked away feeling like they got a good deal. That's negotiation.
Okay, Section 2, the desert and the limo. So Toby's made a few sales, he's feeling good, but then things start to slow down. He's got plenty of stuff, but not enough people buying. And this, my friends, leads him to probably the single most important lesson in all of economics. And it's best explained with a weird story about a desert and a limousine.
But before we get to the limo, we have to lock in this concept: supply and demand. It sounds complicated, but it's super simple. Supply is just how much of something there is, and demand is how many people actually want that thing. The push and pull between these two is what decides the price of pretty much everything in the world. This analogy is a total game changer. So picture this. 3 hikers, totally parched, lost in a blistering hot desert. They stumble upon one person selling 1 bottle of lemonade. The demand is through the roof, but the supply is tiny. That seller can charge whatever they want, 20 euros, 50 euros. Now flip it. Imagine one hiker who finds 3 different limos all selling lemonade. All of a sudden, the sellers have to compete with each other, dropping their prices to get the sale. That same bottle might only cost 2 euros. And Toby realizes his problem. At the flea market, he's one of those 3 limo drivers, not the guy with the only water in the desert.
All right, moving on to Section 3, from barter to banks. So all this gets Toby thinking. If selling for cash is this complicated, why not just, trade his old stuff directly for a bike? And that one simple question sends us on a journey thousands of years into the past to figure out why we even invented money to begin with.
You know, this is how it all started, with bartering. I have carrots, you have a rabbit, we trade. Simple, right? Well, not really. What if I'm a vegetarian and don't want your rabbit? Or what if you need carrots, but I need shoes, not a rabbit? You need to find someone who has exactly what you want and wants exactly what you have. It's a logistical nightmare. So, to fix this bartering mess, humanity came up with an absolutely brilliant idea: money. This slide is like a time machine for your wallet. We started with things everyone agreed had value, like salt. And get this, the word salary actually comes from the Latin word for salt. How cool is that? Then we moved on to shiny coins and eventually the invention of paper money in China, which completely changed the game. Each step just made trading easier and faster. So once we have all this money, where do we keep it so it doesn't get lost or stolen? Well, that's where banks come in. A bank is basically a business that does 2 main things. It keeps your money safe, and it lends that money out to other people and businesses who can use it to grow. So how does a bank actually make money? Well, it's a pretty neat cycle. You put your savings in the bank. As a little thank you, the bank pays you a tiny reward. That's interest. Then the bank takes a chunk of that money and lends it to someone else, say a craftsman who needs new tools. That craftsman pays the loan back plus an extra fee, which is more interest. That fee is how the bank makes its profit. It's designed to be a win for you, a win for the craftsman, and a win for the bank. Okay, that's the history. But what about the money that's actually in our pockets right now? Why is it so hard to earn, and why is it so much more than just a piece of paper? I mean, it's a totally fair question, isn't it? If you need a new bike and the money for it is just paper, why not just hit print on your computer? Well, the answer is that modern banknotes are some of the most high-tech, complex pieces of paper you'll ever touch.
Okay, you are not going to believe the James Bond level tech that is hiding in your wallet. That little number on a euro note, it literally changes color when you tilt it. There are raised lines you can feel with your fingers. Hold it up to the light and a secret portrait appears out of nowhere. We're talking holograms, invisible patterns that only show up under a black light. This stuff is so tough, it can even survive a cycle in the washing machine. So yeah, good luck trying to replicate that with your printer at home. So, since we can't print our own money, we have to do the next best thing. We have to earn it. And that brings us back to a really simple fundamental truth. For most of us, money is what we get in exchange for our work, our time, and our skills. And once you've earned it, well, the next challenge is actually holding on to it. Let's just imagine a typical monthly salary for an adult, 3,000 euros. Now, if you're a kid like Toby, that sounds like you've won the lottery, right? You could buy a whole fleet of bikes with that. But for an adult, the reality is, well, it's very different. This chart is always a bit of a shock. That 3,000 euros that sounded like a fortune, it vanishes faster than you can say paycheck. First, a massive chunk goes straight to taxes. Poof! Then another huge slice for rent and keeping the lights on. Gone. Then you've got to buy food, get to work, pay for your phone. These are the things you have to pay for. By the time all the essentials are covered, what you're left with is just a small fraction of where you started. Suddenly, that new bike seems a lot farther away, doesn't it? So, let's get back to Toby at the flea market. He's learned about pricing, negotiation, supply and demand. He's even got some cash in his pocket. But the big question remains, did he actually get his bike? After a long day of wheeling and dealing, Toby sat down and counted up all his money. And the hard truth is, he just didn't have enough for that shiny new bike he was dreaming of. And that's a feeling we've all had, right? That little gut punch when your dreams and your bank account just don't see eye to eye. But, and this is the brilliant part of the story, Toby doesn't just pack up and go home disappointed, he adapts. He looks at the money he did make and finds a totally new, super creative solution. He couldn't afford a bicycle, but he could afford a unicycle. It wasn't the original plan, but hey, it was still something new and exciting. And that, right there, is the biggest lesson of the whole day. You know, being smart with money isn't really about becoming a millionaire or buying every single thing you want. It's about looking at what you have, understanding your options, and making the absolute best, smartest choice you can with the resources available to you. So I'm going to leave you with a little challenge. Let's say 500 euros just magically appeared in your bank account right now. What would you do with it? Before you mentally spend it on that thing you've been wanting, stop and think, what are the invisible costs in your own life? What's your version of taxes and rent that you need to deal with first? Answering that question is the first real step on the road to financial freedom.